My name is Russ Porcella, and I pastor New Covenant Fellowship in Knoxville, Tennessee. I've entitled this video, the 1985 Kansas City IHOP Enduring Prophecy, meaning it was the intention, I'm convinced, of this prophecy to encourage Kansas City prayer movement to look at itself as God's intention for you is to endure. Mike Bickle is a completely different story. I believe he has lost his right to lead the prayer movement known as the Kansas City IHOP. This is dealing with the prayer movement. It was miraculously confirmed in this prophecy by the 1985 World Series. I think you should consider these things in these delicate days when everything is under question and the survival of the prayer movement is in such question. The 1985 baseball prophecy. It had several dimensions. Number one, it seemingly talked about the demise of the IHOP in Kansas City. I'm sure this was done 39 years ago in 1985. Really, the 21-day fast that took place in 1983 could be considered by many the official start of the Kansas City IHOP, the 21 days of fasting. This was 2 years after that, in May 1985. And I'm sure no one, because of the miraculous things that took place in Kansas City during those first 2 years, no one, I believe, had in their mind, this thing could fail. This thing could come to a close where we would want to shut it down. It appeared like God has given such stunning prophecies and confirmations of such stunning prophecies. But this one, the 1985 baseball prophecy, dealt with the seeming demise of the Kansas City IHOP. It incorporated, as a part of illustrating it, an incredible confirmation that almost defied thinking logic. It included what amounts to a last-minute rescue of Kansas City IHOP. Again, not something that I'm sure was talked about much, but now is the time that it should be talked about. God has already given 39 years ago his intentions for the Kansas City International House of Prayer, for it to be rescued. It'll be a last-minute rescue. An 11th hour, 5 minutes till 12, is what has been prophesied. That's God's intention. And it also discusses a bit what I'll call a core and besetting problem that are identified in this prophetic utterance. This information, you can find it readily on the web. This comes from the 2008 Encountering Jesus series. It has 12 CDs. This comes from session 4 of the 2008. And that was 50 days of extravagant devotion, of which these 12 sessions concerning the prophetic history, but it was called Encountering Jesus. That's where it's freely available on the web. The postseason. The postseason now, in every year for baseball, the postseason in 1985 was a little different than it had been in the years before. I wish that it was a little more clear what actually took place. The postseason started with three series. The first was the divisional series, which were the Kansas City Royals, one of them playing the California Angels. After the first 4 games, the Kansas City Royals were behind 3-1, and they won the next 3 games and won the divisional series. That caused them to advance to the pennant series. The Kansas City Royals played the Toronto Blue Jays that year. It was identical. After the first 4 games, Kansas City Royals were behind 3-1. They won the last 3 games, and they won the pennant series. That they earned the right then to play in the World Series. The World Series, it was the Kansas City Royals versus the St. Louis Cardinals. Again, after the first 4 games, the Royals were behind 3-1, and they won the last 4 games. This was so seeming incredibly impossible to take place. And there were so many people at that time, as they were describing it, saying, this can never happen. They can't win. It can't keep happening game after game. And it did. And Bob was saying that's part of the confirmation. The way the whole postseason for the baseball year, the way it went, it was an illustration involving the Kansas City Royals, what was going to actually take place with the Kansas City International House of Prayer. The 1985 World Series, a delightful article written from a secular point of view, the wild and crazy complete story of the Kansas City Royals, their unlikely win. This is just one example of the secular post as it was published. Quite a delightful story with much of the information about what took place. It was presented by Fox Sports, posting. It's a great read. Bob Jones, in proclaiming this, it was God's prophecy. God's the author. Bob was the mouthpiece, or so to speak, the mailman who was delivering the message that God was sending. And this was the key part of that message. God is going to trumpet a message. It looks like Kansas City is down and out. Like voices are accumulating now for that. It looks like Kansas City is down and out and will never make it, will never recover. And suddenly, at 5 till 12, the Lord is breaking in as a part of the message that Bob was saying, this is what the Lord is going to do. The Lord is breaking in victory. Bob said, it was attributed that he said, it is going to be an 11th hour victory, said a lot. An 11th hour victory, 5 till 12, final minute. It looks like Kansas City is counted out. That is exactly what is occurring now. It looks like Kansas City is counted out, and this was described in detail 39 years ago in May of 1985. He goes, you are going to be counted out by many people. In the 11th hour, the Lord is going to break through. That was the intent. Bob, his intent was to deliver the message that he received from God. That was Kansas City International House of Prayer. It was a message God wanted to send to you, wanted to alert you. It would be such a stunning thing, a staggering thing, that he wanted to alert you years ahead of time. This is coming. I believe it has come. In the 11th hour, it's fascinating. I will play for you in just a moment now. The one rendering of this that I've been able to find. A phrase that Bob would use often was, in the 11th hour, God is going to step in. It just so happens that in the World Series of 7 games, again, the first 2 games were lost by Kansas City, and then the total scores came down to 3-1, meaning 3-1. And the next 2 games were won by Kansas City, which made it 3-3. And prior to that happening, Bob Jones stood in a leadership meeting and said that God spoke to him the number 11. And the number 11 had to do with an 11th hour victory. It was an 11th hour victory that was coming. He explained, God did not tell me exactly how the 11 is going to play out, but it was said publicly on the Saturday before the final World Series game on Sunday. And on Sunday, the Kansas City Royals won the World Series Game 7 by a score of 11-0. This is going to happen, Bob said. In the 11th hour, the Lord is going to break through, and his prayer movement, it's this prayer movement, really the Lord's prayer movement, the Lord's prayer movement is going to succeed. This is going to happen. I want to show you a 4-minute clip now.
This is May 83. Now it's May 85. I'm on a parentheses. May 85. Now, those of you that are like exceptionally intelligent, you're just going to have to put your seatbelt on right now, because this is really going to put you on tilt. But it's true. It happened. And it happened with 1,000 witnesses. It happened. In May 1985, 2 years after the Solemn Assembly, again, I'm on a parentheses, Bob Jones got up and he said, I have the word of the Lord. He looked at me, he says, you're going to get into unbelief when I tell you this, which was his way of saying I'll be skeptical. I didn't appreciate it because he said it on a microphone. But it's when he says it on a microphone and then I'm kind of responsible together with him. But I did this on a microphone. He goes, he says, the Holy Spirit is going to create worldwide attention to be focused on Kansas City. He says, well, that is the good news. He goes, here's the bad news. The Lord's going to do it through the baseball game. I said, the baseball game? He says, yeah, he's going to do it through the baseball game. I go, I don't understand what you're talking about. He says, through the professional baseball. I go, oh, he said this publicly. I mean, I just said, oh, Bob, this is so juvenile. I mean, this is juvenile. And they get in the World Series and the playoffs, they're down 3-1. So they're going to get eliminated. Bob said, I guarantee you, he goes, I don't care about baseball, but I guarantee you they're going to win the next 3. And they do. And then they're down 3-1 in the World Series. He said, I guarantee you're going to win. They're going to go all 4 again. I said, I don't think so. And they did it. And they made a big point, first time in history that ever happened. And he said, the message that God's going to trumpet, he says, it looks like Kansas City is down and out and will never make it. And suddenly, at 5-12, the Lord brings the victory in. He goes, that's the spiritual message over this movement breaking forth in this city. He says, when it looks like it's 5-12 and Kansas City is counted out, he's saying this in May. He says, suddenly at 5-12, the Lord's breaking in, victory. So we were down 3-1, we won 3 in a row. I went, well, we're down 3-1, we win 3 in a row. Now that's pretty startling, but that's like, so what? I'm not that impressed yet. We got a leadership meeting of about 300 or 400 meetings on Saturday morning. I mean, this was really wild. Bob says, well, they're all together and we're talking about the church, and he says, I heard it. He says, I heard it out loud. I heard it in my dream. I heard the voice of the Lord. It spoke resounding. He goes, I heard it very clear. The Lord said 11 is the number because it's 11-hour victory. It's 11th hour victory he's going to give Kansas City. I said, 11 what? He goes, I don't know. And the next day, we win 11-0. And he told everybody this, that it was going to happen. And I think it's USA Today. It says, but you know, I made a whole bunch of different papers. But it says, Miracle World Series. The Monday after, it says, starts off one of these articles. Where is Kansas City? Who knows where Kansas City is? He goes, the drama and the intrigue of this World Series has forced the peoples of the East and West Coast and all around the nations to get out their atlas and find out where Kansas City is. And we had to look and search, and we found Kansas City finally because of the drama of the baseball league. He says, and the headline says, Miracle World Series. Miracle World Series. They call it the I-70 World Series, Miracle World Series. And it says, and who would have thought, we counted them out, and somehow they continued to come back. And Bob says, I'm telling you, the Lord told me in front of all of you on May 1985, it's going to be an 11th hour victory. He would use that terminology, 11th hour victory, 5-12, final minute. It looks like Kansas City's counted out. He goes, you're going to be counted out many times by many people. And at 5-12, in the 11th hour, the Lord's going to break through, and this prayer movement is going to succeed, and it's going to get the attention of the entire earth. He says, this is going to happen. He goes, you wait and watch the baseball league.
Mike Bickle reiterating this prophetic word. He actually devalues it by referring to it as a parenthesis. This was a major prophetic word given with an incredible confirmation that stunned the whole baseball world. As Bob Jones said, God is going to confirm this. It was incredible because God didn't want us to miss the moment and not apply faith in the promise and provision of God given 39 years in advance. Indications that this may be the very time period of this prophetic word are obvious. It's people who are calling for the closing of the Kansas City International House of Prayer. There are names that you would recognize. There's the grandson of Billy Graham, head of a ministry. He's saying it should be shuttered. The whole facility should be shuttered. A blog, Wake Up and Win podcast, Christina and Blaze Foret. He's a former intern. He's calling for Kansas City to be shut down. There are many other voices. Andrew Comiskey of Streams Ministry. My understanding is he's had two daughters who have been or are still a part of the International House of Prayer, and posting, don't see how it can continue. There are so many names that are speaking that don't see how this can happen. The timing. Is there timing that's pointed to in this prophetic utterance that was given 39 years ago? Yes, that timing could be, it was revealing when that would occur. It would be right at the time period when it appeared that Kansas City International House of Prayer was just about to fold, close. It could not continue to exist. And at that moment, it would, God would step in and that he would rescue the International House of Prayer. That's one possibility. A second possibility of the key thing of timing is that it actually would point to what the 11th hour would be when the billion soul youth harvest would enter its third 20-year phase. As Bob Jones said years ago, Bob and Mike speaking to it together, that there would be three 20-year sequences. We've gone through the first 20 years. Bob thought the third 20 year would begin around, as he said publicly, it would begin around 2020. But it's a distinct possibility that it actually didn't begin to 1983 when the 21-day fast, the very first initial 21-day fast. And so we're right at the edge of when it's time. The second 20 years possibly has just finished, and we have just now entered it in 2024. We have just entered the timing of this to coincide just prior to the launch. Actually, the first two phases have been taken place. And it also points to the possible problems. There's an individual it pointed to, Mike Bickle. There was the possible problems that were pointed to. It was that he really, even though he probably tried, he really didn't understand the magnitude of what was being given into his hand, so to speak, to be a part of. And as a result, he made choices and decisions that were so counter to who he was portraying himself to be and what the House of Prayer movement was based on, because he really didn't understand the magnitude of what was taking place. And so made decisions that were tragic decisions for all involved. This is addressed in that same 2008 Encountering Jesus on tape 9. And it was this way. And then it was Bob speaking, related for him. And then it was the 2 years later. Remember the World Series. He says the message is going to be, they're counted out. Kansas City out. They've lost it at the 11th hour. This was Bob speaking this years ago. God's going to break in, and suddenly there's victory at the last second. And then again, the 11. He told us, and then the next day, it's the 11. They won 11-0. And the way the whole drama of that happened, God did such an unusual and extensive confirmation, I believe, because he didn't want us to miss the moment. He didn't want us to lay it down. He wanted us to hold steady in this particular time. In tape 8 of that same series, the 12-tape series, Mike reiterated that Bob spoke to him. He said, "You don't understand. This is something far bigger than you understand." I think that was the core problem. He did not understand the magnitude of what this was, and so gave permission to himself to choices that were so below what he had been called to be a part of to help lead. This is something far bigger than you understand. Far, far bigger, he said. The Lord, this is a sovereign thing that's taking place. And with other prayer movements involved. This is something God is raising up, a preemptive strike, so to speak, before a world war. Did you think this was going to go untested by God or the devil? This is Bob Jones supposedly speaking to Mike Bickle. He said, Bob Jones speaking, this is going to be tested by God and the devil to the uttermost. This is a worldwide prayer movement. This is going to touch the bringing of the national conversion for the nation of Israel. This is so critical. This is Bob Jones speaking to Mike Bickle. As Mike related, you just don't understand what you're doing. You're leading a little church and wanting it to grow with a little bit of evangelism. He goes, that's good, but that's not what's happening here. It's a global prayer movement intended to help bring in a global billion-soul youth harvest, primarily youth, not exclusively, in the end time scenario. I believe we are in that time period. We are right there. And I believe God gave a marker to help identify when was the 11th hour. It's right now. I urge you to act like you're a believer in what God is doing. You're a believer in Jesus' name.